Vampires, creatures of the night, they evoke fear and fascination. But what exactly are they? Vampires are mythical beings. They are often described as undead. They sustain themselves on the life essence of the living. Usually this is blood. They are often pale. They are often gaunt. This sets them apart from their victims. Vampires possess supernatural abilities. Enhanced strength and speed are common. Some shapeshift. They might turn into bats or wolves. Others control the weather or possess hypnotic powers. Weaknesses vary in different legends. Common weaknesses include sunlight, garlic, religious symbols, and a stake through the heart. The vampire's appearance varies. Traditional depictions emphasize a thirst for blood. They have sharp fangs. Their eyes are piercing. Modern interpretations offer more variety. Some vampires are alluring. They are seductive. Others are monstrous and terrifying. Regardless of their appearance, vampires share a parasitic relationship with the living. This makes them both compelling and repulsive. The vampire is a powerful archetype. It reflects our deepest fears and desires. It reminds us of our mortality. It makes us question the boundaries between life and death, good and evil. Over the centuries, the vampire has evolved. It has adapted to different cultures and times. Yet its allure remains as strong as ever. The belief in vampires is not confined to one culture or time period. These enigmatic creatures have fascinated and terrified people for centuries, transcending geographical boundaries and historical eras. Tales of the undead, preying on the living, exist across the globe. From the dark forests of Eastern Europe to the bustling streets of ancient China, stories of these nightmarish beings have been passed down through generations. Each culture has its own unique spin on the vampire myth. These variations are not just mere stories, they are deeply rooted in the cultural fabric and reflect the values, fears, and beliefs of the people. These variations reflect local beliefs, fears, and superstitions. They are often documented in ancient manuscripts and passed down orally by village elders, ensuring that the legends endure through time. In Eastern Europe, there's the Slavic vampire, often called a Nosferatu. This creature is a staple of Slavic folklore, embodying the region's deep-seated fears of death and the supernatural. It is a rotting corpse, a grotesque figure that rises from the grave. The Nosferatu is often depicted as a decayed, ghastly being, its appearance alone enough to instill terror. It emerges from the grave to torment its victims, seeking to drain their life force. The Nosferatu's presence is a harbinger of doom, bringing with it a sense of inevitable dread. It is often associated with disease and plagues. During times of epidemic, the Nosferatu was blamed for spreading illness, a scapegoat for the inexplicable suffering of the people. Asian folklore features creatures like the Chinese Zhangshi. This hopping vampire is a unique addition to the pantheon of undead beings, reflecting the distinct cultural elements of Chinese mythology. This is a hopping vampire, a creature that moves in a stiff, jerky manner. The Zhangshi's unusual locomotion adds to its eerie and unsettling nature. It drains the life force, or qi, of its victims. The concept of qi is central to Chinese culture, and the Zhangshi's ability to siphon this vital energy makes it a particularly fearsome entity. In Japan, we find the kappa, a water demon. This creature, though not a traditional vampire, shares many similarities with the blood-sucking fiends of other cultures. It shares similarities with the vampire. It preys on humans and drinks their blood. The kappa's aquatic nature and its method of attack make it a unique but equally terrifying counterpart to the vampire. Even in the Americas, vampire-like creatures exist. The rich tapestry of folklore in this region includes beings that echo the characteristics of vampires, adapted to the local environment and culture. The aswang of the Philippines is a shape-shifting monster. This creature's ability to transform adds an extra layer of horror, making it an unpredictable and formidable foe. It preys on people at night, using the cover of darkness to hunt its victims. The aswang's nocturnal habits make it a constant threat, lurking in the shadows and waiting to strike. It has a particular taste for pregnant women, adding a chilling specificity to its predations. This aspect of the aswang legend highlights the vulnerability of expectant mothers and the deep-seated fears surrounding childbirth. In South America, there's the Tlahuelpuchi. This creature is a shape-shifting witch, blending elements of vampirism with witchcraft. This is a shape-shifting witch, capable of transforming into various forms to deceive and hunt its prey. The Tlahuelpuchi's versatility makes it a particularly dangerous and elusive predator. It drains the blood of infants, a horrifying detail that underscores the creature's malevolence. The Tla'ahuelpuchi's preference for the blood of the young adds a deeply unsettling dimension to its legend. These diverse myths highlight a universal human fear. Despite the differences in cultural context, the core of these stories remains the same, a fear of the unknown and the unseen. It is the fear of the unknown, the terror of what might be lurking just out of sight. This primal fear is a common thread that runs through all vampire legends. It is the fear of what lurks in the shadows, the dread of encountering something beyond human understanding. This fear is universal, transcending cultural and geographical boundaries. It is the fear of death and what might come after. The vampire, in its many forms, embodies these fears, giving them a tangible and terrifying form. The vampire, in its many forms, embodies these fears. It is a manifestation of our deepest anxieties, a creature that personifies the unknown and the unknowable. It gives them a tangible form, making the abstract and the intangible something that can be seen and confronted. This makes them all the more terrifying as they bring our darkest fears to life. This makes them all the more terrifying. The vampire legend in all its variations continues to captivate and horrify, a testament to the enduring power of these ancient fears.
The vampire myth didn't appear overnight. It evolved over centuries, shaped by the fears and beliefs of countless generations. Its roots reach back to ancient civilizations, where the line between life and death was often blurred. These cultures grappled with mortality, seeking to understand what lay beyond the grave. They sought explanations for the unexplainable, weaving tales that would endure through the ages. Ancient Mesopotamia had tales of demonic entities, beings that defied the natural order. These demons fed on blood, a life force they believed could sustain them. They preyed on the vulnerable, those who were already weakened by illness or misfortune. These stories likely influenced later vampire myths, planting the seeds of fear that would grow over time. Ancient Egypt, with its elaborate burial rituals, also contributed to the vampire mythos. Egyptians believed in preserving the body after death, a practice that hinted at a form of immortality. They believed this was essential for the afterlife, ensuring the deceased could continue their journey. The desecration of tombs and the fear of the vengeful dead played into early vampire lore, adding a layer of dread to the concept of the undead.
In ancient Greece and Rome, tales of demons and spirits mirrored aspects of the vampire myth, reflecting a shared human fear. These creatures fed on blood or life essence. They haunted the living, embodying the terror of the unknown. One example is the Greek Lamia, a figure that has endured in folklore. She was a monstrous figure. She preyed on children. She drank their blood, a chilling reflection of parental fears. This story reflects the fear of losing loved ones, a universal anxiety that transcends time and culture. It reflects the fear of the unknown, the dark corners of our imagination where monsters lurk. It is a fear deeply ingrained in the human psyche, a primal instinct that has driven our myths and legends. These early myths and legends demonstrate that the fear of the undead is not new. It is a fear that has evolved with humanity. It is a fear as old as humanity itself, a constant companion through the ages. It stems from our primal instincts. We fear the dark, we fear the unknown, we fear death. These fears are universal. The vampire embodies these fears, giving them a tangible form. It gives them a name and a face, making the abstract concrete. This makes them all the more terrifying, a reflection of our deepest anxieties brought to life.
The Middle Ages proved to be fertile ground for vampire myths. This era, shrouded in mystery and fear, saw the birth and evolution of many legends that have persisted through the centuries. This period was marked by plague and disease. The most infamous of these was the Black Death, which decimated populations and left a lasting scar on the collective psyche of Europe. It was a time of widespread death and fear. The sheer scale of mortality was unprecedented, and communities were left grappling with the horror of losing loved ones and neighbors at an alarming rate. The Black Death, a devastating pandemic, swept through Europe in the 14th century. It killed millions, wiping out nearly a third of the continent's population. The speed and ferocity of the disease were unlike anything people had ever seen. This horrific event had a profound impact on vampire lore. The fear and confusion surrounding the plague created a fertile ground for supernatural explanations. People were desperate for explanations for the plague's devastation. They lacked scientific understanding, and in the absence of medical knowledge, they turned to folklore and superstition to make sense of the chaos. Superstitions and folklore filled the void. Stories of vampires, creatures that fed on the living, became a way to explain the unexplainable. The symptoms of the plague, like skin lesions and bleeding from the mouth, were often attributed to vampires. These physical manifestations of the disease were terrifying and mysterious, leading people to believe in supernatural causes. People believed that the recently deceased were rising from the grave. The idea that the dead could return to harm the living was a powerful and frightening concept. They believed the dead were spreading the disease. This belief was fueled by the rapid spread of the plague and the lack of understanding of how diseases were transmitted.
This fear led to gruesome practices. In their desperation to stop the spread of the plague, people resorted to extreme measures. Suspected vampires were dug up. The bodies of those believed to be vampires were exhumed and subjected to various rituals intended to prevent them from rising again. Their bodies were desecrated to prevent them from rising again. This often involved staking the corpse, decapitation, or burning the body to ensure it could not return to life. These practices, fueled by terror and ignorance, demonstrate the power of fear. The collective anxiety of the time drove people to take drastic actions in an attempt to protect themselves and their communities. They demonstrate the human need to find explanations for the unexplainable. In a world where science and medicine were in their infancy, supernatural explanations provided a sense of understanding and control. The vampire, a creature already associated with death and disease, became a scapegoat for the horrors of the plague. This association was reinforced by the physical symptoms of the plague, which mirrored the traits attributed to vampires. This solidified its place in folklore. The stories of vampires became intertwined with the history of the plague, creating a lasting legacy that would endure for centuries. The association between vampires and epidemics continued beyond the Middle Ages. Even in later centuries, outbreaks of disease would often revive fears of vampirism. Outbreaks of unexplained illnesses often led to accusations of vampirism. The fear of the unknown and the need to find a culprit for the suffering led to the persecution of those believed to be vampires. This highlights the human tendency to find patterns and explanations. In times of crisis, people look for reasons and solutions, even if they are based on superstition rather than fact. Even if those explanations are based on superstition, they offered a sense of control in a world that often felt chaotic and unpredictable. The belief in vampires provided a way to make sense of the suffering and to take action, however misguided, to protect oneself and one's community.